Most people think Jesus' story began in Bethlehem. But what if I told you he revealed his true identity long before the manger? Hidden in Scripture is a mystery so powerful that once you see it, you'll never read the Bible the same way again. The question is, why hasn't anyone told you this before? Most people never hear this in church, but it's right there in Scripture. Jesus didn't start in Bethlehem. His identity was revealed long before the manger. And when we trace his words and the hidden prophecies, a shocking picture comes to life. He had already explained who he was from the beginning. This isn't just history. It's a mystery that holds a message for us today. And as we unravel it together, you'll see why this truth was ignored for centuries and why it changes everything about faith, hope, and how we view Jesus now. Let's slow down and analyze one of the most neglected chapters in the entire Bible, John 17. It's often called the priestly prayer, but hidden within it is a key to Jesus' true identity. Listen carefully. He prays, "Father, glorify me with the glory I had with you before the world existed." Think about it. Jesus isn't asking for something new. He's asking for something he already had. This isn't the language of a man beginning his story in Bethlehem. This is the language of eternity breaking through time. It's like leafing through an old family album and suddenly finding a photo of someone you thought you knew. But who is there? In a place and time you never imagined. That photo changes the whole story. In John 17, Jesus opens the album of eternity and says, "I was there before all this." And if that's true, then John 17 isn't just a prayer. It's a portal, a glimpse behind the curtain of creation itself. But what he says next makes it all the more mysterious. In John 8:58, Jesus makes a statement so bold that the religious leaders picked up stones to kill him. He said, "Before Abraham was, I am." Notice this. He didn't say "I was." He said "I am." This is not past tense. It is eternal presence. These two words, "I am," echo since Exodus 3:14, when God revealed himself to Moses as "I am that I am." By using this exact same phrase, Jesus wasn't just making a poetic statement. He was placing himself in God's very identity. Think about how powerful that is. It's like someone walking into a crowded room and saying, without title, without name, without explanation, just "I am." And everyone instantly knows who they are, because that presence alone carries absolute authority. That's why his words shook his listeners so deeply. They realized this wasn't just a rabbi speaking. This was the eternal God standing before them, declaring his divinity for all to see. But if he revealed his identity so clearly, why did so many ignore it? The answer becomes even clearer in the next revelation. Decades after walking with Jesus, the Apostle John was exiled on the island of Patmos. Alone, persecuted, and forgotten by the world, he suddenly received a vision that shook him deeply. He describes seeing one like the Son of Man, dressed in a robe reaching to the feet, with a golden sash around his chest. His head and hair were white like wool. His eyes were like blazing fire, his voice like the sound of rushing waters, and his face was like the sun shining in all its splendor. It wasn't a metaphor. John wasn't exaggerating. He fell to the ground as if dead, for he was faced with the revealed glory of Christ. Same Jesus he had leaned on at the Last Supper now stood before him as the Alpha and the Omega, the eternal King. It's like seeing someone you've known your whole life suddenly revealed as royalty. The familiarity is still there, but majesty overwhelms. John's vision pulls back the curtain and shows us Jesus' identity wasn't just expressed in words, it was revealed in glory. But here's the shocking contrast. This radiant, glorified Jesus once chose to hide his majesty. And that decision changes everything we understand about his mission. Think about it for a moment. The same Jesus whom John saw resplendent in glory and revelation walked the dusty roads of Galilee in human weakness. Philippians 2:7 says that he made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a servant. It's almost impossible to comprehend. Imagine a brilliant light hidden behind a thin curtain. You know it's there, but it seems dim compared to its intense brilliance. That's exactly what happened when the eternal Son of God took on human form. His glory was veiled, but it never faded. We see glimpses of this unfold: the transfiguration on the mount, where his face shone like the sun, or the prophecies of Isaiah 53, where the suffering servant bore the weight of humanity's sins. He was both the humble lamb and the glorious king. And here's the mystery. He chose this humility. He chose to hide his majesty so he could walk among us, suffer with us, and love us in the most personal way possible. Why would the King of Glory choose to come as a servant? The answer takes us deeper into his heart. Jesus could have entered history in a blazing light, surrounded by angels, seated on a throne of fire. Instead, he chose the path of a servant, born in a manger, walking among fishermen, touching lepers, washing feet. It's like an architect entering the very house he designed, not as the owner demonstrating power, but as a guest living peacefully in its rooms. The Creator humbled himself to dwell in his own creation. It wasn't weakness, it was love. Every step of his humility was a message. God is not distant, untouchable, or unreachable. He is the King who drew near, the Lord who chose vulnerability so that we could truly know him. And this choice reveals something profound. His identity lies not only in his glory, but in his willingness to lay it down for us. But what if I told you that this same humble servant is also the one who spoke the universe into existence? Let's see how Scripture directly links him to the creation of everything. The Bible doesn't just describe Jesus as a teacher or miracle worker. It goes further, much further. John 1 says, "All things were made through him. Without him was not anything made that was made." Colossians 1 states, "In him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. All things were created through him and for him." Stop for a moment. The baby in the manger, the man who was mocked and crucified, was the very one who hung the stars in the night sky. The carpenter's son was also the cosmic architect of the galaxies. Think of it this way. When you see a masterpiece, you don't just admire the canvas, you perceive the genius of the artist behind it. Creation itself is Jesus' signature, written across the entire universe. And yet this truth is often ignored. If he is the one who created all things, then he has authority over all things. But here's the question. If he is above the angels, where does that place him in the order of heaven? The next revelation makes the difference quite clear. Throughout the Bible, angels appear in glory, brilliant, powerful, awe-inspiring. Daniel fell trembling before one. Ezekiel described being so overwhelming that words can barely describe them. And yet, Scripture makes one thing absolutely clear. Jesus is not like them. Hebrews 1 says directly, "To which of the angels did God ever say, 'You are my son, today I have begotten you'?" Angels reflect glory, but Jesus and glory. They serve under his command, but he reigns by his own authority. Imagine the difference this way. The moon illuminates the night, but only because it reflects the sun. The moment the sun rises, its brightness dims the moon's brightness. Angels are reflections, but Jesus is the source. And here's the hidden truth. If Jesus is above the angels, then his authority isn't limited to the heavens. It extends even further to realms we often fear, realms like death and the grave itself. And that's where the next revelation takes us. In Revelation 1:18, Jesus declares something that turns the entire spiritual world upside down. "I am the living one. I was dead, and now I am alive forevermore. And I have the keys of death and Hades." Think about what this means. Keys represent ownership, authority, and control. The grave does not belong to Satan. Hell is not his kingdom. Death itself bows before the risen Christ. It's like standing in front of a locked cell, terrified, and then realizing that the one who loves you already holds the master key in his hands. Only he decides which doors will remain closed and which will remain open forever. This changes everything. It means fear no longer has the final say. It means the power of death is broken, and it means Jesus' identity is not limited to glory in heaven, but to supreme authority over life, death, and eternity itself. But this revelation wasn't just for John on Patmos. It was a message of hope for a suffering and persecuted church, and for us today. When John received the vision of the glorified Christ, he wasn't sitting comfortably in a synagogue or preaching to crowds. He was exiled on a barren island, isolated from everyone he loved, while believers throughout the Roman Empire were hunted, imprisoned, and killed. And it is at this very moment that Jesus appears, not as the humble carpenter, but as the risen and reigning Lord. Why? To remind his people that even in the darkest night, he still holds the universe in his hands. The persecuted church needed to see that their suffering was not the end of the story. It's like being in the midst of a raging storm with waves crashing all around you, when suddenly you realize that the captain of the ship isn't just awake, he's at the helm, unwavering, fearless, and in complete control. That's the hope John's vision conveyed. And this is where this connects with us. Perhaps you're not facing Roman soldiers, but you are facing trials, doubts, or fears that leave you feeling abandoned. The same Jesus who revealed himself to John reveals himself to you, the Alpha and Omega who reigns over chaos. But all of this leads to the most personal question of all. After all these revelations, Jesus in eternity, Jesus in glory, Jesus holding the keys of death and life, there is one question that is deeper than all the others. Is he really at the center of your life? It's easy to admire him as a historical figure, or even respect him as a great teacher. But John's vision, the hidden words of his prayer, and the I am declarations leave no room for indifferent responses. He is the Lord of all, or of nothing. Think of it this way. You might recognize a king's crown in a museum, admire its beauty, and leave unchanged. But when the king himself reaches out to you, it demands a choice. Jesus isn't inviting us to observe him. He's calling us to follow him. So here's the real mystery. The same Jesus who reigns over creation, the angels, death, and eternity is knocking at the door of your heart. The question is, will you let him be not only the Lord of the universe, but the Lord of your life? Because that decision changes everything. We see this woven throughout Scripture. Jesus is not a figure who simply appeared in Bethlehem. He is the eternal Son of God, the one who prayed in John 17 for the glory he had before the foundation of the world, the great I Am who stood before Abraham, the radiant king whom John saw on Patmos, the servant who chose humility, the creator who shaped the stars, the Lord above the angels, he who holds the keys of death and Hades, the hope of the persecuted church. Every page whispers the same truth. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the same yesterday, today, and forever. But here's the part that makes this more than history. He didn't reveal who he was just to John or the early church. He revealed it to you, to remind you that your faith is not based on shifting sand, but on the ageless rock of ages. So now the question is yours. What part of this mystery impressed you most? Do you believe this truth was hidden for a reason? And, most importantly, will you let the Jesus of eternity be the Jesus who reigns in your life today? Because once you see him as he truly is, you will never be the same again.